I only tapped the mute button to clear my throat. But what I heard in those 10 seconds made my hands shake. When I look back, that was the moment everything in my quiet life shifted. If you're watching this, tell me where you're from or what time it is. I remember the small details of that evening because nothing felt dramatic at first. It was our usual Sunday video called Daniel sitting at his desk, pretending he wasn't exhausted, and Emily beside him with that soft, polite smile she kept for family conversations. I was in my living room, a cup of warm tea beside me, the window cracked open just enough to let the cold air in. It was an ordinary moment. It's the kind you never think twice about. We were talking about groceries of all things, how the prices kept rising, and how the neighbors' dog wouldn't stop barking at the mail truck. Then I started coughing. Not badly, just one of those dry scratches in the throat that makes you instinctively reach for the mute button. I pressed it. The red icon lit up. I leaned back, waiting for the coughing to pass. And that's when it happened. My son's voice didn't fade into conversation the way it normally did. Instead, it dropped into a tone I hadn't heard since he was a teenager. Low, tight, impatient. Just give it a little time, he whispered. He won't question it. Emily exhaled sharply. We can't keep waiting. If we don't move soon, someone else might step in. I froze. My hand hovered above the mug. For a moment, I wondered if I'd muted the wrong side maybe they simply couldn't hear me, but I could still speak. My throat tightened as I watched them on the screen. They weren't smiling now. They weren't even pretending. Daniel leaned closer to Emily. He trusts us. That's the advantage. Emily shook her head. He's getting older, Daniel. Things slip. We need to be sure before the sentence cut off because she glanced at the screen again, checking if I was listening. I stayed perfectly still. My breathing slowed on purpose. And somewhere deep in my chest, something old and instinctive woke up something quiet but steady. The part of me that had learned long ago that listening could be more powerful than speaking, I didn't unmute right away. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to hear one more sentence, one more hint of what they were planning. Emily lowered her voice even further. Trust me, he won't notice anything. My hands trembled then, not from fear. Just from the sudden understanding that I had stepped into a conversation meant for no one but them. And I had done it by accident. A moment later, I clicked unmute, forcing a small laugh. Sorry, I said, trying to keep my voice even. Something went down the wrong way. They both snapped back into character instantly. Emily smiled gently, her tone sweet again. Of course. Are you okay? Daniel nodded too quickly. Yeah, Dad, you all right? I watched them both with a softness they probably mistook for confusion. But inside, I was already sorting their words, holding each sentence up to the light, feeling for the edges. We ended the call earlier than usual. They said they had dinner plans. I said I was a bit tired. As soon as the screen went dark, the room changed temperature. Or maybe it was just me realizing that the quiet safety of my home had a new shadow in it, one shaped by whispers and half-finished sentences. I sat at the table for a long time after that, replaying the conversation in my mind. The way Emily said move soon. The way Daniel said he won't question it. Those weren't the kinds of words that belonged in a conversation about groceries or weekend plans. Those were the kinds of words people used when they were preparing for something. Coordinated. For the first time in years, I reached for a yellow legal pad I kept in the kitchen drawer. I wrote the date at the top of the page. Then I wrote everything I remembered, line by line. Without emotion, this was the beginning of a record I never expected to need. By the time I put the pen down, the handwriting felt foreign, like someone else had written it. Someone calmer. Someone sharper. Night settled across the living room, turning the windows into dark mirrors. I stood up to close the blinds and, that's when I saw it, The plain white envelope had been pushed through my mail slot sometime during the call. No return address? My name printed neatly on the front. I picked it up, feeling the weight of the paper inside. I didn't open it yet. I just held it and let the silence shape itself. And for the first time, I wondered how long this had been going on. And what else I wasn't supposed to hear, but I would learn soon enough. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept hearing their voices in the dark, replaying every word they whispered when they thought I was muted. When morning came, I sat at the table with a cup of lukewarm coffee and realized something simple and uncomfortable. I wasn't ready to pretend nothing had happened. If you're watching this, tell me your country or what time you're listening. The envelope from last night still sat untouched beside my keys. I kept glancing at it, but I didn't open it yet. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up the call window from the night before, as if seeing their faces frozen on the screen might help me understand something. It didn't. They looked normal. Light from Daniel's desk lamp, Emily leaning in with that polite, fixed smile. You'd never guess what they were planning from a screenshot. I clicked the trackpad, zooming in. The mute icon glowed red at the bottom corner. That little symbol felt heavier than it should. A small button that had cracked open a truth I didn't know I needed to see. I sat back and took a slow breath. People don't change overnight, I told myself. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe there was context I didn't have. Maybe no. I had heard them clearly. Before I could think further, my phone buzzed. A message from Emily. Good morning. Hope you're feeling better today. Let's talk later about some future plans, just to make things easier for all of us. My chest tightened, not from fear, but from recognition. Politeness, covering intention. Warm language wrapped around something colder. That message didn't come from concern. It came from strategy. I didn't reply. Instead, I picked up the envelope. The paper was thick too heavy for a simple letter. When I tore it open, a crisp document slid out onto the table. It was from an insurance firm, a policy review notification. I hadn't asked for one. I hadn't touched my insurance in years. I read the first few lines twice, then a third time. As per recent inquiry initiated on your behalf. I sat very still. Someone had contacted them pretending to be me, or at least presenting themselves as having my permission. My mind went back to last night's whisper. He won't notice anything. I placed the letter carefully beside my laptop and took out the yellow legal pad from yesterday. I wrote the new date. Then I wrote, Item number 1, insurance letter, not requested. Language suggests external inquiry. Keep for record. I didn't write how I felt. Feelings were unreliable. Paper WASN, single quotes. Around noon, I made myself call Daniel. I kept my voice soft, neutral. Morning, I said. Did either of you ask for an insurance review for me? There was a pause too long to be natural. Then Daniel cleared his throat. Insurance review. No, Dad. Why would we? Before I could respond, I heard Emily in the background, whispering something too muffled to catch. Daniel added quickly, Maybe they just do those automatically. I didn't correct him. I didn't tell him the letter, said recent inquiry. Didn't ask why he sounded rehearsed. I see, I said gently. Well, I'll look into it, he exhaled in relief. Yeah, sure. Let me know if you need anything. I ended the call slowly, letting silence fill the room after the click. The truth wasn't in what he said. It was in what he avoided saying. I stared at the envelope again. The paper felt colder now. An hour later, I forced myself to step outside. The air was crisp, the kind that wakes up your lungs. I walked to the mailbox, checked it again, out of habit. Empty. Calm street. No movement. But under all that normalcy, something else lived something deliberate. When I returned inside, I placed the insurance document into a clear folder and clipped it shut. The first page of my evidence trail. By evening, my phone buzzed again. This time, from Daniel. Hey, Dad, everything okay? You seemed a bit off on the call yesterday.
Yeah, my fingers hovered above the screen, but I didn't type anything.
Instead, I looked at the message the way you look at a photo you've seen too many times, realizing only now the parts you missed before, because the truth wasn't that Daniel was checking on me. The truth was that he was checking if I had caught on. I turned the phone face down that night. I wrote one more line in my notebook. They are preparing something, and they think I'm not paying attention. It wasn't fear that followed that thought. It was clarity, and clarity has its own quiet kind of power. I didn't know it yet. But the envelope was only the beginning. The next clue would arrive faster than I expected, and it would come not by mail, but by voice. I wish I could say the strange envelope was the part that unsettled me most that week, but it wasn't. What unsettled me was how quickly the next piece of the puzzle arrived. If you're watching this, tell me what time it is where you are. The morning light hit the dining table and a soft, angled wiggled across the wood, catching the corner of that sealed envelope like a spotlight. I'd left it untouched the night before, half deciding I would open it in the morning, half hoping it would somehow disappear on its own. But paper has a way of waiting for you. It doesn't leave until you deal with it. I picked it up, feeling the unexpected weight of the document inside. The envelope was crisp, professionally sealed, and the return address was from a well-known insurance office across town. My name was typed perfectly, no spelling errors, no smudges. Whoever requested this review knew exactly what they were doing. Inside, the letter was straightforward, almost cold in its efficiency. We are following up on your recent inquiry regarding policy modifications. Those words sat on the page like small, sharp stones. I hadn't made any inquiry. I hadn't touched anything in years. My life had been steady predictably, almost comfortably uneventful. Until now, for a long moment, I sat with the letter in my hand and let the room stay completely still. The quiet felt heavier than usual, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Then, as if timed perfectly to break that silence, my phone buzzed. A message from Emily. We should talk later about your long-term plans. Nothing urgent, just trying to help. That little heart at the end made me exhale slowly through my nose. It reminded me of something a friend once told me. When someone wraps a knife in velvet, it still cuts the same. I put the letter down, straightened the edges, and reached for my yellow legal pad again. The morning air was cool against my wrist as I wrote, Item number 2, Policy Review Letter. Initiated externally. Not by me. I dated it. Underlined the words, not by me. Then placed the letter into the clear folder behind item, #1. That folder was barely half a centimeter thick at the time. I didn't know it would grow into an archive, a quiet armor made of paper, timestamps and facts. Around noon, I called the insurance office. I made my voice gentle, almost hesitant, something people tend to interpret as harmless. Hi, I said. I received a policy review notice and just wanted to confirm who requested it. The woman on the phone typed for a moment. Yes, it shows here someone called in last week. Someone? I asked. Not me? Another pause longer than before. The caller identified themselves as a relative with permission to handle inquiries. A relative, I repeated softly, letting the words breathe. Yes, sir. I thanked her, ended the call. Then sat for a moment looking at the wall, not thinking anything dramatic, just letting the facts line up naturally. A. Relative let permission. Handling my policy, there weren't many candidates. My phone buzzed again this time. Daniel. Hey, Dad. Doing okay today? He asked, his tone almost. Careful. I'm fine, I said. Why do you ask? Just checking, he replied too quickly. You seemed a bit stressed yesterday. Thought I'd make sure. In the background, I heard a soft rustle. A whisper, Emily's voice, too faint to make out, but unmistakably present. The whisper of someone guiding someone else. Someone leading. I didn't push. I didn't mention the letter. I didn't mention the insurance call. I'm all right, I said gently. Actually, I'm going to have a quiet day. It seemed to relieve him. Good, he said. Let us know if you need anything. After the call, I placed the phone face down again and looked at the folder, now holding 2 pieces of evidence. 2 small slips of paper that suggested something larger unfolding behind closed conversations and polite messages. But the day wasn't done with me yet. Around 5 in the evening, just before dusk, another envelope slid under my door. Quiet whisper across the floorboards. No knock, no footsteps. Just paper arriving like a message from the shadows. This one was slimmer. Inside was a piece of folded printer paper. No letterhead. No signature. Just a short typed line. You should really talk to your son about his plans." The font was plain. The meaning wasn't my heart didn't pound. I didn't panic. I just stared at it, letting the sentence settle into me like a puzzle piece snapping into place. Someone else knew. Someone thought. I didn't. I added this note as item number 3, slid it into the folder, and closed the cover gently. By the time the sun fully set, I understood something. This wasn't going to fade away. It wasn't misunderstanding. It wasn't coincidence. It was a pattern, and patterns, once seen, can't be unseen. What I didn't know was that the next piece of evidence wouldn't come by mail at all. It would come from a friend, and it would confirm my worst suspicion. I didn't plan to involve anyone else that early, not until I understood what was happening. But the truth has a strange way of pulling other people in, even quietly. If you're watching this, tell me your city or what you're doing right now. I met Laura Bennett at a small cafe on the east side. The kind of place where the chairs always feel a little too cold and the lights always feel a little too soft. Laura and I had known each other for years. She wasn't family, but she was one of the few people who had seen my life unfold piece by piece through tax seasons, yearly reports, and occasional life changes. She had a habit of reading numbers the way other people read novels. That made her a dangerous person to lie to and an invaluable person to ask for clarity. She sat at the corner table with a stack of papers in front of her, her glasses perched low on her nose. When I walked in, she didn't greet me with her usual light sarcasm. She looked up, studied my face for half a second, and asked, "Are you all right?" I sat down across from her. "That's what I'm trying to figure out." We ordered coffee, hers black, mine barely warm by the time I touched it. I handed her the small, clear folder containing the first 3 items: the insurance letter, the typed note, and the scribbled notes I had taken the night of the call. She read them silently, flipping pages with the steady, practiced movements of someone who'd handled thousands of documents in her life. When she finally looked up, her expression had changed. It wasn't shock. It wasn't dramatic concern. It was calculation. "Who else has access to your personal accounts?" she asked. "No one," I replied. She raised an eyebrow. "Not even family?" I shook my head slowly. "Not officially." She tapped the insurance letter with her finger. "Well, someone is either impersonating you or calling with enough confidence that the agent didn't question it." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The silence between us was answer enough. Laura leaned back, crossed her arms, and took a slow breath. "All right, let's check something." She opened her laptop, pushed her glasses up, and began typing. The cafe noise faded into background static, the low hum of conversation, the hiss of steam from the espresso machine, the occasional chime of the door. All of it blurred into nothing as I watched her analyze my accounts with a precision I had always admired. After a few minutes, she stopped. "This," she said, pointing at the screen. "This wasn't here last month." I leaned in. It was a simple login address inquiry request tied to my name. A small entry, almost invisible except for what it implied. "Someone," she said quietly, "is preparing paperwork around you. Something involving property." These requests don't happen alone. The words settled inside me like falling stones, soft at first, then heavy with meaning. I kept my voice steady. "Do you think, Daniel?" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Instead, she looked at me with the kind of seriousness reserved for complicated truths. "I think," she said gently, "that someone is making moves behind your back. You need to start documenting everything." I nodded. "I already started." She smiled faintly. "Good. Keep going." We sat in silence for a moment. The kind of silence that isn't empty, but full of realization, full of worry, full of meaning. Then she reached into her printer bag, pulled out a sheet, and pressed it into my hand. "Here," she said. I printed the suspicious address inquiry. Timestamp, origin, reference number. That was the clean, undeniable record. And then in that quiet cafe, something shifted in me. Not fear, not anger, just clarity. Clarity so sharp it felt like it cut the air. "I don't want to confront them yet," I said. "Good," she replied. "Don't. Not until you know the size of the hole you're standing next to. I placed the new printout carefully into my folder, smoothing the edges the way I always did with important documents. It was becoming a habit, a ritual almost, a way of grounding myself. When we parted ways, the sky had turned gray. A cold wind followed me to my car, carrying that strange feeling of something watching. Something unseen moving in the background. And that feeling grew stronger when I reached home. Because as I pulled into my driveway, headlights passed slowly down my street. Not fast, not casually. The car moved like someone scanning the houses, counting doorways. It was Daniel's car. He didn't stop. He didn't wave. He just drove past, slow, deliberate, silent. I stood on the porch, watching the taillights fade into the distance, and a quiet truth settled inside me. He wasn't hesitating anymore. And whatever happened next wasn't going to stay polite. I wasn't expecting the doctor's number to appear on my phone that morning. We hadn't spoken in months. My yearly checkup wasn't due for another 6. But the moment I answered and heard the uncertainty in his voice, I felt something inside me settle into place. Like another piece sliding into the puzzle I'd been pretending didn't exist. If you're watching this, tell me what time it is where you are, Michael, Dr. Grant said. I just wanted to confirm the appointment you booked. The cognitive evaluation. I stood very still. The house was quiet, colder than usual, as if the walls themselves were listening. I didn't book anything, I said. There was a pause, real one, not the accidental kind. The kind where someone's eyes widen on the other end of the line. Well, he said carefully, your son called yesterday to schedule it. He said you'd mentioned memory issues. My hand tightened around the phone. Memory issues. It was almost impressive how precise the lie was, close enough to be believable, vague enough to be weaponized. I never said that, I answered. My voice didn't shake, didn't rise, just leveled out. I thought that might be the case, he said softly. That's why I wanted to check with you directly. Directly. The word slid into my chest like a warning. I thanked him, ended the call, and placed the phone face down on the kitchen table. A thin beam of sunlight was crawling across the tablecloth, warming the edges of the insurance letter. The anonymous note, the address inquiry printout. 3 clues, now 4. And each one led back to the same shadowed place. I walked to the living room window, pulling the curtain slightly. My street looked the same: empty sidewalks, trimmed hedges, the neighbor's cat sunning itself on the driveway, peaceful, ordinary. The kind of street where betrayal shouldn't exist, but betrayal doesn't wait for the right setting. A few minutes later, I called Daniel. The phone rang longer than usual, as if he were deciding whether to answer. Hey, Dad, he said lightly, too lightly. Everything okay? I just got a call from Dr. Grant, I replied. The silence that followed was sharp. Then oh, really? What did he say? He said you booked a cognitive evaluation for me. I didn't accuse him. I didn't raise my voice. I just placed the fact in front of him like a card on a table. He swallowed. Oh, that. Emily thought it would be good. It's just proactive, at your age. At your age, that sentence was delivered with hesitation, but not apology, more like preparation. As if he'd practiced it in his head. I didn't agree to that, I said. Right, he said quickly. We just thought, well. Emily thought it could help avoid future problems. In the background, Emily's voice drifted near the microphone. Tell him it's routine, she whispered. Routine. There it was again, the velvet-trapped knife. I see, I said softly. Thank you for explaining. He sounded relieved. Too relieved, of course. Just trying to help. We ended the call, and I stood there for a moment, listening to the uncanny peace of the house. The clock ticking, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a car turning a corner. Then I went to my desk, opened the drawer, and took out the clear folder. My shield against confusion, against misdirection, against whatever they were preparing next. I wrote, item number 4, unapproved medical appointment, initiated by Daniel. Claimed memory issues, verified with Dr. Grant. I placed the note behind the other documents and closed the folder gently. The plastic snapped softly, the sound grounding me. An hour later, as I was folding laundry in the living room, my phone lit up with another notification, this time from Daniel's device, which I'd helped set up months ago. A text preview flashed across the top of the screen before disappearing. Emily moved the timeline up. I stared at the dimming screen. My hands didn't shake, my breathing didn't change. But inside, something steadied like a decision settling into place. They weren't improvising. They weren't hesitating. They weren't considering. They were planning. And for the first time, I felt a small, cold certainty inside me, not fear, not sadness, preparedness. Because if they were moving their timeline up, then I needed to start creating one of my own. And I needed to move faster than they expected. The next day would give me exactly that chance. In a room full of polite faces, sharp questions, and the first real glimpse of their plan. I've always believed that politeness is a language people use when they're trying to hide the weight of their intentions. That belief became a fact the moment I stepped into Daniel and Emily's dining room that evening. If you're watching this, tell me your first name or where you're listening from. The house looked the same as always, quiet, organized, curated like a catalog page. Emily kept it spotless. Every cushion aligned, every candle unlit, but decorative, every picture frame perfectly straight. But that night, the air felt different, heavier, as if it carried a conversation I hadn't been invited to hear yet. Emily greeted me with a bright smile, warm in all the places warmth should be, but her eyes. They were measuring me. "Come in, Michael," she said. We made dinner. Nothing fancy. Nothing fancy meant a table set like a staged home tour. Silver utensils lined in symmetry, cloth napkins folded, candles placed at perfect intervals, though unlit. She was always performing. But tonight the performance had a purpose. Daniel came out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. "Hey, Dad," he said, avoiding eye contact for just half a second. "Glad you came." I noticed he'd shaved. He only did that when he wanted to appear responsible. Dinner started with small talk, my garden, his work, the weather, the kind of harmless conversation that floats on the surface while sharper things wade beneath. I watched the exchange between them. Emily would speak. Daniel would glance at her for approval. It wasn't a marriage dynamic I recognized. It was a team dynamic, coordinated one. Halfway through the meal, Emily placed her fork down gently and folded her hands. "Michael," she said, "we've been thinking." My chest tightened, not from emotion, but from anticipation, like the feeling just before a chess opponent moves a piece you expected. "Yes," I asked. She leaned forward slightly. "Of a beautiful home." "Truly, but managing a property alone can be a lot. It might make sense to consider selling it before the market shifts." "Before the market shifts." Such a practical, harmless phrase on the surface. I didn't respond immediately. I let the silence grow just enough for them to feel it. Daniel cleared his throat. "We just don't want you stressed. You deserve comfort." Comfort. The word felt rehearsed. I took a sip of water and said quietly, "I didn't realize my home was causing anyone stress." Emily smiled without blinking. "Oh, it's not. We just want to help you prepare." Prepare. That was the word. Same one. Woven into their whispers, their messages, their timeline. My eyes wandered briefly around the room, subtle inspection. Nothing obvious. And that's when I saw it. On the kitchen counter behind Emily, half hidden under a magazine. A blue folder? A folder labeled Plan B? The letters were angled, handwritten, but unmistakable. I didn't look at it directly, just long enough to register it, long enough for it to burn itself into my mind. When I shifted my gaze back to Emily, she had turned slightly, just enough to block my view of the folder. "Not an accident," she continued. "You know, if you'd like, we can help with paperwork. Finding a buyer, organizing things." Organizing things. Her tone softened on that phrase. Too soft. I nodded slowly. "I'll think about it." Emily's smile didn't widen, but something in her posture settled like a pawn advancing a square. We finished dinner, though I barely tasted anything. The conversation stayed polite, practiced, polished. And beneath it all, the tightening sense that the walls around their intentions were getting thinner, clearer. After dessert, Daniel walked me to the door. Emily stayed behind, clearing plates with quiet urgency. When we reached the porch, Daniel placed a hand on my shoulder, light but stiff. "Dad," he said softly, "just trust us, okay? We're only trying to help. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." There it was, the first crack in the polite mask. I looked at him for a long moment, studying the tension in his jaw. The way his fingers tapped against his leg, the way he avoided meeting my eyes. He wasn't nervous anymore. He was invested. "I appreciate your concern," I said gently. He nodded, relieved, and stepped back. As I walked to my car, the cold evening air hit my face, grounding me again. My hand stayed steady on the steering wheel, even as my mind replayed the image of that blue folder. Plan B. There was no universe in which I wasn't meant to see that. I drove home in silence, the windshield reflecting streetlights like thin lines of truth. At my kitchen table, I wrote in my notebook, Item number 5, dinner with Daniel and Millie. Conversation about selling the house. Emily blocking view of Plan B folder. Then I filed it behind the others, the folder growing thicker, more defined, quiet defense taking shape. And I realized something as I closed it. If they had a Plan B, then Plan A had already begun. There are moments in life when the truth doesn't scream at you. It whispers. It waits. It lets you walk right into it without warning. That's exactly what happened the day Daniel left his tablet at my house. Re-listening from, or what time it is. He'd stopped by unexpectedly that morning, said he was. Just checking up on me, though the way his eyes darted around the living room told a different story. He was scanning things, noticing what I kept, what I wrote down, whether anything looked different. He stayed only 15 minutes. Then he rushed out, saying he had errands. It wasn't until I walked into the living room an hour later that I saw it on the arm of the sofa, his tablet. Sleek, thin, locked, but still glowing faintly. I picked it up carefully, intending only to charge it so the battery wouldn't die. Old habits, small kindnesses left over from when trust was simpler. When I plugged it in, the screen lit up again. Not enough to unlock it, not enough to reveal anything private, just enough to show a preview of something he had left open. A message window. A typed sentence. Still in the drafts folder. Dad won't cooperate. We may need option 2. My breath didn't catch, my hands didn't shake. Not anymore. I'd been expecting a truth like this, even if I didn't know its shape yet. I didn't scroll. I didn't open anything else. I didn't violate a boundary he could use against me later. I only looked at what was already there. Glowing quietly on the lock screen, Dad won't cooperate. We may need option 2. The phrasing was clinical.detached.cold. But what struck me most wasn't the message, it was the tone. The certainty. Daniel, who just days earlier had sounded hesitant, unsure, conflicted, had typed these words with finality, with purpose, as if he had already accepted a role he once seemed reluctant to play. I pulled out my phone and took one photo, just one, making sure the timestamp and the screen were both visible. Evidence doesn't need drama. It only needs clarity. Then I unplugged the tablet, placed it neatly on the dining table, and sat down in the quiet. The house felt colder again, though the thermostat read the same number as always. I wrote in my notebook, Item number 7, draft message on Daniel's device. States, Dad won't cooperate. We may need option 2. My handwriting looked steadier than I expected. Clear, controlled. I placed the note and the printed photo into the folder behind the others. The plastic slipped over the pages with a faint hiss, like a file cabinet closing. That sound comforted me more than anything, Daniel had said in weeks. He returned 30 minutes later. Breathless, knocking too hard on the door. Dad. Sorry I left my tablet. I was halfway across town when I realized he stepped inside before I even answered fully. His eyes darted immediately toward the table, landing on the tablet like a magnet finding metal. Did you see anything? He asked. His voice was casual, but his shoulders were too tight. I just charged it so the battery wouldn't die, I said mildly. He nodded too quickly. Right, yeah, thanks. He picked it up with a stiffness that betrayed him. His fingers hovered over the screen like he wanted to check something right then. Right there, but he didn't. He forced a smile instead. "Emily and I are hosting dinner Friday," he said suddenly. "Come by. It's been a while. It's hadn't." And we both knew it. "I'll check my schedule," I said. He hesitated at the doorway. His eyes drifted toward my desk where my folder sat not open, not obvious, but present. The edge of it was peeking out, the tabs visible. He swallowed, then he left. When the silence settled, it felt different from the silence before. Heavier. As if the air itself knew we had crossed into new territory, one where politeness was only a costume. Sat at the dining table and watched the light move slowly across the wall. The day continued outside. Birds landed on the fence. A car passed in the distance. The world didn't shift at all, but I had, because now I knew there was an option too. And for people like Daniel and Emily, option 2 wasn't a metaphor. It was a plan. A plan that would reveal itself soon. In the form of a phone call I wasn't supposed to receive from a lawyer I'd never spoken to, who somehow already knew my name. Some truths arrive gently. Others land like a document sliding across a desk. Polite, clean, undeniable. That's how it felt the morning a lawyer I'd never spoken to called me by mistake and said my son's name before my own. Re-listening from or what time it is. The call came just after 10 a.m. I was pouring coffee, the house still carrying that cool, early day quiet. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello, this is Carter and Westman Legal," a woman said. "I'm calling to confirm tomorrow's deed transfer meeting with..." She paused. The pause was everything. "With Daniel Harris," she finished abruptly. My hand tightened around the mug. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "Could you repeat that?" There was a rustle of papers on her end. It's the sound of someone realizing they'd stepped into a conversation they weren't prepared for. Is this Michael?" she asked. "Yes." Another pause. Sharper this time. "Oh," she stammered. "My apologies. I must have dialed too early. Attorney Carter, we'll follow up with you later." She hung up before I could respond. I didn't move for several seconds. The coffee in my hand cooled. A small bead of condensation slid down the mug and onto my thumbnail. Funny how the quietest details feel loud when truth is approaching. A deed transfer meeting. With Daniel. Tomorrow, the weight of those words settled into my chest like a slow, deliberate stone. I sat at the table, breathing steadily, listening to the soft tick of the clock on the wall, a sound I'd always found calming. Not today. Today it sounded like it was counting down. After 5 minutes, I called the number back. A different voice answered, a receptionist this time. "Carter and Westman Legal. How may I assist you?" "Yes," I said. "I received a call about a deed transfer meeting. I'd like more information." She hesitated, a barely perceptible crack in her professional tone. "Let me check the schedule for you, Mr. Harris." She put me on hold, but not long enough to find anything meaningful. When she returned, her voice was steady, too steady. "I'm not seeing anything formally filed yet. Attorney Carter will contact you personally." I thanked her and hung up slowly. The quiet that followed felt dense, like the air had thickened. A deed transfer, initiated without my knowledge, scheduled, before informing me, hidden under the pretense of help. I reached for my folder, the one that had become part archive, part shield. I opened it and placed a fresh sheet inside. Item number 8. Accidental call from Carter and Westman. Mention deed transfer meeting with Daniel. Not authorized. My handwriting was slow, deliberate. Like the truth needed time to settle. Not 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Daniel. "Dad," he said brightly, too brightly. "Hey, just checking in. How's your morning going?" I closed my eyes. There it was, the tone people use when they're waiting to see if a fuse has been lit. "Fine," I answered calmly. "And yours?" "Oh, he said, laughing awkwardly. "Busy, meetings, errands, the usual." He never used words like errands unless he was covering something. I let the silence stretch. Gently but intentionally, then I said, "A lawyer's office called me by mistake." I heard it, the soft, sharp inhale on the other end. "A lawyer," he repeated. "What kind of lawyer?" "A property lawyer," I said. "Carter and Westman." A beat. 2 beats. His voice dropped half an octave. "Oh, maybe it was for something else." "I don't know them." He knew them. He knew them well enough for his name to come out of the assistant's mouth before mine. I didn't confront him. I didn't accuse him. I didn't demand anything. I simply said, "I suppose their attorney will explain." That silence, that 1 second of frozen air, told me more than any confession could. "Sure," he said weakly. "Let me know if you, need anything?" We ended the call with a politeness that felt like a costume neither of us could remove. I stood by the window afterward, watching the soft sway of branches in the backyard. The day was still, bright, ordinary, and yet my life had shifted 1 notch deeper into a direction I hadn't chosen. My phone buzzed again, not a call this time. A clean, formal subject line, draft, transfer of property, preliminary. Attached was a PDF. I opened it. There it was, my address, my parcel number, my home. Listed under a heading I hadn't approved, not finalized. Not signed, but prepared. Someone had been working ahead. Someone had been planning for the moment. I stopped paying attention. Someone had decided the home I built my life in was theirs to schedule away. I saved the document, printed it, slid it into the folder behind item #8, and as the printer cooled and the page stiffened, I felt something subtle shift inside me, not fear, not anger, readiness, because whatever Daniel thought he was building, he had just handed me another piece of proof, and proof once gathered becomes protection. The next chapter of this story wouldn't begin with a letter or a call. It would begin with a conversation in a quiet cafe. With a woman who wanted my house more than I realized. "Emily," you said, "some confrontations don't happen in arguments. They happen in whispers, in smiles, in places where the air pretends to be warm." That's why when Emily asked me to meet her for coffee, I already knew the real purpose of the invitation. If you're watching this, tell me your country or the time where you are. The cafe she chose wasn't random. It was quiet, polished, the kind of place where people spoke softly and pretended everything was fine. She was already seated when I walked in, dressed neatly, hands wrapped around a warm mug as if she were simply enjoying her morning. "Michael," she said, standing to greet me. Her smile was gentle, almost affectionate. "I'm so glad you came." I nodded and took the seat across from her. The chair was cold, the metal legs screeching slightly against the tile floor, the only sound in a room that felt too calm. "How have you been feeling?" she asked, tilting her head with practiced concern. "Fine," I said. Busy," she sighed. "You know how it is. Work, schedules, and making sure the family stays safe. Family.safe. Words chosen with care." A waiter brought water to the table. Emily thanked him with a sugar-sweet voice, then leaned forward slightly, lowering her tone. "Listen," began Daniel and I. "We've been thinking a lot about your future. My future, not ours, not yours and ours together. Just mine packaged, evaluated, and ready for discussion." "Oh?" I murmured. She smiled again, softer this time. "You've built a beautiful life, a beautiful home. But maintaining a house on your own, it can be a lot. And the market is unpredictable." There it was, the seed she wanted to plant. The same seed she'd been slipping into conversations with Daniel, into texts, into suggestions framed as care. "I appreciate your concern," I said quietly. "I know you do," she replied. "But this isn't just concern. It's responsibility. Daniel feels it deeply." I watched her hands as she spoke, perfectly still, fingers interlaced, no nervous fidgeting. She wasn't improvising. This moment had been rehearsed. "I'm not sure selling my home is necessary," I said. She inhaled almost imperceptibly, recovering her smile in under a second. It doesn't have to happen now. We're just talking. Just exploring. Exploring blowing, planning accelerating. She reached into her bag and pulled out a slim, glossy packet, placing it gently in front of me like a gift. I had this done for you, she said. A market assessment. An evaluation of your home's potential value and what you could do with the money. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I looked at the cover of a photo of a house that wasn't mine, framed in bright lighting, staged for sale. I let the silence hang between us. Emily, I said softly, where did this come from? She didn't blink. A friend. Someone who owes us a favor. Us. I asked, me and Daniel. She clarified. We've been coordinating, not helping, not supporting, coordinating. That was the truth finally slipping out from. Under the smile, I opened the packet slowly. The pages were neatly printed, stapled, organized. But the last page was what mattered. A signature line pre-filled with my name, typed, not signed. Not forged, but prepared, waiting. I slid the packet closed. You're moving quickly, I said. She held her mug with both hands, warming her fingers. Only because we care. And because, well, the longer you wait, the harder these decisions become. I looked at her carefully then, really looked. The calm eyes, the measured breathing. The subtle tilt of the head meant to appear empathetic. Everything about her was composed, but beneath that composure was something colder. Determination shaped like kindness. Let me think about this, I said. She exhaled in relief, too much relief. Of course. Take your time. The meeting ended with polite smiles and a promise to stay in touch. But the moment I stepped outside, the cold air hit me like truth breaking the surface. The sky had turned a pale gray, wind brushing against the sidewalk as if trying to remind me of something real. When I got home, I slid the packet into my evidence folder, writing, Item number 9, Emily's printed market assessment. Last page includes typed seller signature line with my name. As the page slid into place, a strange quiet settled around me. Not fear, not confusion, understanding. Because I finally saw the shape of their plan. Emily smiled. Daniel followed. The paperwork moved quietly in the background. This wasn't spontaneous, this wasn't emotional, this was procedural. And people who plan procedurally don't stop until someone stops. Them, I didn't know it yet. But the next person to reveal a piece of the truth wouldn't be Emily. And it wouldn't be Daniel. It would be someone in a white coat holding a medical file I didn't create. There's a specific kind of silence that fills a doctor's office when something is wrong. Not medically, but morally. I heard that silence the moment Dr. Grant closed the door behind me and said my name in a tone I had never heard from him before. If you're watching this, tell me what time it is where you are. He glanced toward the hallway, then back at me, lowering his voice. Michael, I need to show you something, and I need you to stay calm. I sat down. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. The air between us was already thick with something unspoken. He turned his computer monitor slightly in my direction. On the screen was a digital medical file mine. A routine file I'd had for years, clean, simple, always updated only during checkups. But now it looked different. There were new notes, new entries, new concerns, and none of them were written by me or by him. The first line hit hardest. Patient demonstrates signs of confusion and poor memory recall. Recommending cognitive evaluation ASAP. My stomach tightened, but my voice stayed steady. I never said these things, I know Dr. Grant whispered. That's why I called you. Another entry. Patient forgot recent conversations and repeated questions multiple times. Then another. Family reports decline in judgment. Family.reports. Decline. I sat very still. The steady hum of the computer filling the silence between us. These notes weren't added in person, he said. They were uploaded through the patient portal. By who? He hesitated. Not because he didn't know, but because he knew it mattered how he said it. I checked the access log, clicked a tab. 2 login attempts were made, both successful. My eyes settled on the screen. There it was, the TIMESTAMP, the device type, and the phone number connected to the password. Reset request. It was Daniel's number. For a moment, the room felt smaller, the fluorescent lights colder. The paper on the wall charts diagrams, certificates blurred into meaningless shapes. I spoke softly. Someone is building a case. Dr. Grant exhaled. Yes, not maybe, not it's possible. Just yes. I leaned back slightly, fingers curling around the edge of the chair, grounding myself. I wasn't angry. Anger clouds vision. What I felt was something quieter, sharper. Awareness. When were these notes added? I asked. Within the last 2 weeks, he replied. Right around when the appointment was scheduled. So the timeline was deliberate, coordinated, layered. Can you remove the entries? I asked. He shook his head. Not without an administrative review, but I can add a correction and document our conversation officially. I nodded slowly. That was enough. Paper cuts both ways, depending on who holds it. He typed something into the system, his fingers moving with professional certainty. When he finished, he printed a physical log, the access details, the timestamps, the phone number, the portal activity. He handed the sheet to me. For your records. The eye folded it carefully, tucking it into my coat pocket, feeling the weight of it, thin but powerful. As I stood to leave, he touched my arm lightly. Michael, are you safe at home? The sincerity in his voice almost cracked something in me. It's almost... Yes, I said softly. I am now. Outside, the afternoon air was crisp, sharper than usual. I walked to my car slowly, letting each step settle my thoughts into place. Inside the car, I didn't start the engine right away. I took out the paper and read the phone number again. Daniel's number, my son. The boy who used to run down the hallway in socks, sliding across the tiles and laughing. It felt like looking at someone through a pane of glass, someone familiar but unreachable. When I got home, I placed the medical log into my evidence folder behind item number 9. The folder felt heavier in my hands, though its weight hadn't changed. Maybe it was me changing the way a person changes when denial is no longer an option. I wrote beneath the new entry. Item number 10, unauthorized medical notes. Portal access traced to Daniel. Doctor confirmed manipulation. The words were neat, controlled, understated. As I set the pen down, my phone buzzed across the table. A message from Daniel. You okay? Heard you talk to Dr. Grant today. I stared at the screen. How did he know? So quickly? Unless. Someone told him. Unless. He was waiting for the fallout. I didn't reply. I simply flipped the phone face down and sat in the quiet, feeling the day settle over me like a thin layer of frost, because this wasn't about concern. This wasn't about care. This was preparation. And the next revelation wouldn't come from a call or a document. It would come from something harder, too. Ignore a shift in Daniel's eyes. A shift I wouldn't be able to unsee. Some betrayals aren't spoken. They're seen in posture and silence, in the way a person looks at you when they think you've stopped being useful. If you're watching this, tell me your first name or where you're listening from. Daniel invited me over for dinner again. Not Emily, Daniel. That alone told me something had changed. The message he sent earlier was short, direct. Come by tonight. We need to discuss next steps. Next steps. Not plans. Not ideas. Not options. Next steps language used when a decision has already been made. I arrived just after 7. The house looked the same, but the atmosphere was different. A quiet, humming tension, as if someone had just turned off a vacuum and the air hadn't settled yet. Daniel opened the door before I knocked. His smile was polite, but his posture had shifted. Shoulders squared. Chin lifted slightly. Eyes sharper than before. Authority, or the performance of it. Dad, he said, come in. I stepped inside. The lights were lower than usual. Emily wasn't in the living room. I heard faint clinking from the kitchen instead. Daniel gestured for me to sit at the dining table, Drink? He asked. No, thank you. He sat across from me, folding his hands. A gesture he never used with me before, something he likely picked up from a meeting. A negotiation, maybe even a rehearsal. Dad, we need to talk about your house. There it was. No preamble. No softening. I see, I said quietly. He exhaled, relieved I hadn't resisted immediately. Look, this isn't easy for us. We love you. But holding on to a property that big, alone, it's not sustainable. Sustainable, another word people use when they want to remove someone without sounding cruel. I've been managing fine, I answered. Daniel leaned forward. For now, but things change. People change. You're not young anymore, said it softly but not gently. It landed between us like a verdict. Emily walked in then, carrying plates. She set them down without meeting my eyes. Her smile was rehearsed, the kind you'd give a neighbor you barely liked. Hope you're hungry, she said warmly, but her warmth didn't reach her eyes. They flicked briefly toward Daniel, checking his posture, confirming he was on script. Dinner began with small talk, but it didn't last. The conversation kept looping back, every topic bending toward the same. Direction, plans, future, house, responsibility. At one point, Daniel asked, "So, what is your plan with the house?" I looked at him carefully. I didn't realize I needed one. He let out a breath, not of frustration, but of impatience. A new kind of impatience. Dad, you can't just keep things as they are forever. Before I could respond, my eyes drifted past him to a stack of papers on the side counter. I didn't stare long, just enough to register what they were. A printed checklist. Actions before sale. Bullet points, deadlines, phone. Numbers, tasks assigned. My name was next to several of them. Emily must have noticed where I was looking, because she stepped in front of the counter with a practiced ease, blocking the papers as naturally as someone adjusting a light. Dessert? She offered brightly. No, thank you, I said. Daniel cleared his throat. Dad, you need to think about this. We're not trying to pressure you, but waiting makes everything harder. Harder for whom? They didn't explain. They didn't have to. I studied Daniel's face. His eyes weren't nervous anymore. Not searching for approval. Not wavering between guilt and obligation for the first time. They were steady, firm, certain. A shift. A son who had once been pulled now standing on the pulling side. Why now? I asked quietly. He hesitated. The first crack. Then Emily touched his shoulder lightly, a cue. Daniel straightened. Because it's time to move forward. Forward. A pretty word for removal. After dinner, he walked me to the door. The hallway light cast a long shadow behind him, making him look older, harder. Dad, he said softly, please. Don't make this difficult. That sentence, that tone was the clearest shift of all. Not a request. Gay warning dressed as care. I nodded slowly and stepped outside. The cold air was a relief, honest in a way their house no longer was. When I got home, I placed a new note in my evidence folder. Item number 11, dinner conversation. Daniel leading. Printed checklist actions before sale. Emily blocking view. Certainty in tone. I closed the folder quietly. The snap of the plastic soft but final, because tonight, something fundamental had changed. Daniel wasn't being guided by Emily anymore. He was aligned with her and aligned people. Don't hesitate, they accelerate. The next sign of that acceleration would come soon in the form of a folder labeled something I wasn't meant to see. Option 2. There are moments when the truth doesn't creep toward you. It waits behind a thin layer of paper, hoping you won't notice it. But I noticed, and once I did, I couldn't unsee it. From, or what time it is. It happened on a quiet afternoon when Daniel came by to help with a few things. That was his phrase, help. But lately, his visits felt less like help and more like inspections. He watched what I wrote down. He glanced at my mail. He checked the calendar on the refrigerator, as if confirming whether I had any appointments I wasn't supposed to have. That day, he asked if he could look through some old storage boxes in my hallway closet, a place he hadn't asked about in years. I agreed, mostly because I wanted to see what he was actually looking for. He carried in a small leather briefcase, one I'd never seen him use before. It sat on the dining chair, half open, angled so he could reach into it easily. For most of the visit, I ignored it, but eventually he stepped into the hallway to answer a call, leaving the briefcase unattended. I didn't move from where I sat. I didn't lean over. I didn't touch it. But one thing lay half exposed. It's just enough for me to see. A navy blue folder, labeled in black marker. Option 2. The letters looked rushed, not messy, just unpolished. Like something written by someone who wanted to finish before anyone saw. My breath didn't change. I didn't blink. I simply observed the same way you watch a deer step onto a road in front of you. Slow, cautious, not yet aware of the danger. A single sheet of paper peeked out from the folder's edge. Not enough to read fully, but enough to make out a picture. A care facility brochure. Soft colors, smiling staff, a tagline promising safety and peace of mind. The kind of brochure families look at when deciding where to place someone who can't care for themselves anymore, someone they want out of the way. Daniel returned a moment later. "Sorry," he muttered, shoving the briefcase closed too quickly. "Work call." I nodded. "Busy day?" He shrugged, a little too casual. "Just coordinating things," coordinating that word again. A quiet echo from Emily's rehearsed vocabulary. I didn't ask about the folder. I didn't ask about the brochure. I didn't mention what I'd seen. Some truths are more dangerous when spoken out loud too soon. Instead, I asked, "Everything okay?" Daniel hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, but long enough to break the illusion of confidence he'd been wearing since dinner. "Yeah," he said. "Everything's fine." But his eyes betrayed something new. Urgency. A kind of determined impatience. He stayed for another 20 minutes, making small talk that floated on the surface of deeper intentions. Then he left with a quick, distracted goodbye. The moment the door clicked shut behind him, I walked to the kitchen counter, opened my folder, and wrote, "Item number 12, Daniel's briefcase left open." Folder labeled Option 2, Visible Care Facility Pamphlet. Indication of alternative plan. I placed the note behind the others. Each sheet of paper beginning to form a map, a blueprint of a plan that wasn't mine. Later that evening, as I made tea, I replayed the scene in my mind. The Navy folder, the brochure, the rushed handwriting, and something else, the timing. Option 2. Wasn't a future idea. It was a contingency. Something prepared in case Option 1, convincing me to sell willingly, didn't work. And lately, I'd stopped cooperating with their timeline. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, listening to the soft hum of the heater and the occasional distant car passing on the street. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic. But inside the quiet, I felt a realization rising like tide. Wasn't dealing with a misunderstanding. I wasn't dealing with pressure. I wasn't dealing with concern. I was dealing with a plan. A plan with steps. A plan with roles. A plan with a backup scenario. Option 2. As I sat there, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message. From Emily. 2 simple words. "We're close." No context, no explanation, no emoji, just those words. I stared at them for a long time before placing the phone face down, because whatever close meant to them. It meant something entirely different to me. Their plan was tightening their confidence, growing their timeline, accelerating, but they didn't know something important. While they were working on Option 1 and preparing Option 2, I was building something myself, a plan that required no pressure, no rush, no emotion. A plan made of paper, truth, and patience. And in the next chapter, I would begin putting that plan quietly into motion with a trap that didn't require confrontation. Only silence. Some traps don't need bait. They don't need confrontation, raised voices, or accusations. Some traps require only one thing: silence, the kind that invites the other person to reveal themselves, re-listening from, or what time it is. I didn't plan a test that morning. It arrived naturally, almost gently, like the truth had been waiting for me to notice it. I was sitting in the living room, reviewing my notes, when Daniel knocked on the door. "Dad." He called you home? His voice was too bright, the tone of someone who wants to seem relaxed, but is carrying urgency just beneath the surface. I opened the door and stepped aside. "Come in," I said. Daniel walked in quickly, scanning the room the way he always did now, as if checking whether anything had changed that might affect their timeline. "I wanted to see you," he said. "Make sure things are okay." I nodded and offered him a seat. He sat slowly, elbows on his knees, fingers tapping lightly, the body language of someone rehearsing a specific conversation. That was when the idea formed quietly in my mind. Not a plan, not revenge. A test to see whether he would reveal the truth, without realizing it, so I pretended. I let my eyes drift away from him as if trying to recall something I'd forgotten. A small, intentional pause. A breath that lasted a second too long. "Dad?" he said quickly. "You okay? You seem off." I nodded, but didn't answer too clearly. "Just tired," I murmured. His entire posture changed in one heartbeat. His shoulders straightened, his voice sharpened. His expression turned calculating. That was all it took, one small crack in my clarity. And he lunged for the opportunity. "Maybe," he said softly. "Maybe it's time to schedule that evaluation, just to be safe." My heart didn't race. My expression didn't shift. I only listened, because listening was the trap. "How urgent do you think it is?" I asked, keeping my voice mild, the exact tone someone uncertain might use. Daniel didn't hesitate. "Maybe soon," he said carefully. "It's just, we worry. We. Emily's influence woven into every syllable," he continued. "I mean, you've been forgetting things. You repeat yourself sometimes." It wasn't true, and he knew it. I leaned back slightly and asked the question very softly, "Why so urgent?" His face changed in a way I will remember for the rest of my life. Not fear, not guilt. Something worse. He froze. Not because he didn't know the answer, but because he hadn't expected me to ask. His eyes flicked, sideways toward the hallway, toward the briefcase he'd brought inside. I didn't need to look again to know what was in it. Option 2. "I just think we should be proactive," he said finally, his voice suddenly thin. "It's better for everyone if we handle things before it's too late." Too late. A phrase shaped like concern, sharpened like a warning. Before he could continue, we both heard footsteps approaching. Emily entered the room with a smile so soft it almost felt like a touch. She sat beside Daniel, placing her hand lightly on his arm. A signal, cue, a steadying line. "Michael," she said warmly, "we know these conversations are uncomfortable, but we're thinking long-term. Safety, stability, the future." Her voice was perfectly pitched, polite, calm, empty of truth, but her eyes weren't. Her eyes questioned. "Daniel, did you push too soon? Did he notice? Did he slip? Did you?" He swallowed. "Dad just needs clarity," he whispered to her. Unaware that I heard every word. "I see," she murmured. Then she turned back to me, tone smooth again. "Why don't we help you with the evaluation? Just to rule things out." I didn't speak. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I let the silence stretch. Silence, when you use it right, becomes a mirror. And they were both staring into it. Finally, Emily looked away. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. The tension in the room thickened like fog settling over still water. After a few more forced pleasantries, they stood to leave. Daniel squeezed my shoulder, a gesture meant to look like affection but felt like pressure. "If you need anything," he said, "we're here. Just don't make this harder than it needs to be." That sentence again, polite on the surface, threaded with control, When the door closed behind them, I let out a slow breath and walked to my desk. I took out my phone and pressed play. The voice memo recorded every word of our conversation crisp. Clear, time-stamped, but not paper this time, digital truth. I saved the file, labeled it neatly, and added a note to my folder. Item number 13, recorded conversation. Daniel pushing evaluation. Emily coordinating responses, both reacting to perceived confusion. Confirmed urgency. As I closed the folder, the evening light broke gently across the table, quiet and unhurried. Their plan was accelerating, but so was mine, because tomorrow, Daniel would take the next step, and he'd send a message that wasn't a suggestion anymore, but a demand disguised as concern.
Oh.
Some conversations don't begin with words. They begin with the weight that enters a room before a person does, a heaviness that tells you the decision has already been made. That's what I felt the moment Daniel and Emily stepped into my house that afternoon. If you're watching this, tell me your country or what time it is where you are. They didn't knock the way they usually did. 3 quick taps from Daniel. A softer one from Emily. This time, it was one single, firm knock. A formal knock, a knock meant to establish control. When I opened the door, they were standing closer together than usual, aligned in posture and tone. Emily's smile was polite but thinner, her eyes more focused. Daniel looked tense, but not uncertain. "Not anymore, Dad," he said briskly. "We need to talk." Seriously, stepped aside and let them in. The living room was warm, the afternoon sun falling across the carpet in long golden lines. It should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like the stage for something I didn't want to witness. They sat on the sofa, side by side. I remained in the armchair across from them, letting the silence stretch. Silence reveals intention faster than questions ever do. Emily broke first. "Michael," she said gently, "we're concerned deeply." She placed a folder on the coffee table between us, too polished, too prepared. "We've been doing research, thinking about what's best." Daniel nodded, opening the folder with a nervous flick of his finger. Inside were printed pages, neat, organized, labeled. The first one was titled, "Evaluation Recommendation, Cognitive Decline Indicators." My heartbeat didn't change. My breathing didn't shift. I simply observed, "Where did you get this?" I asked. Emily folded her hands, rehearsed calm. "We drafted it with some guidance, just to make things easier when you go in for your appointment." Appointment. Not evaluation. Not checkup. Appointment, as if it were already scheduled. I didn't agree to any evaluation. I reminded her. Daniel exhaled sharply. "Dad, come on. You're being unreasonable. We're trying to help." Help. The most misused word in situations like these. I reached for the document. The paper was crisp, warm from wherever they'd prepared it. My eyes scanned the sentences, vague concerns, fabricated patterns, bullet points that hinted at forgetfulness, confusion, instability, things that weren't true, things someone needed to seem true. The dates didn't match real appointments. The medical terminology was inconsistent. It was a document designed to intimidate, not to diagnose. I placed it calmly on my lap. "This," I said softly, "is fabricated." Daniel blinked. "Emily didn't, Dad," he snapped. "Don't start imagining things. We're trying to prevent a crisis. We're trying to keep you safe." Safe, that word again. A velvet word wrapped around steel. "What crisis?" I asked. Emily leaned forward. Her voice dipped into a tone meant to sound compassionate. "The house, Michael. Living alone? The stress. The confusion. We need clarity before something happens. Clarity for them, not for me." I let the quiet settle again before asking, "Why now? Why all this urgency suddenly?" Daniel froze. Literally froze. His shoulders locked. His eyes flicked to Emily, searching for support. For the next cue, Emily stepped in immediately. "It's not sudden," she said. "We've been noticing changes, repeating questions, forgetting conversations." I kept my gaze on her. When did I repeat myself? She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. No memory, no example, no detail. A rehearsed accusation with no substance. Daniel jumped in quickly. Dad, don't make this hard. There it was, the phrase they returned to again and again. Not because it was true, but because it was useful. I placed the document carefully on the table. Who wrote this? I asked. Emily's jaw tightened, a flash of something cold beneath the politeness. We collaborated, she said, for your sake. I nodded slowly, letting the truth settle into place. They hadn't come to discuss, they had come to announce. The conversation ended without resolution. They stood to leave, their confidence shaken by my calmness, not my resistance. At the door, Daniel touched my arm, a gesture meant to soothe, but landing like pressure. Dad, he whispered, just trust us. We're the only ones who care. I didn't respond. When they left, the house felt different. Not emptier, clearer, like fog lifting from a coastline. I walked to my desk, took out my evidence folder, and slid the recommendation document inside. Then I wrote, Item number 14, fabricated evaluation packet. Dates inconsistent. Language rehearsed. Pressure increasing. I closed the folder gently. As I stood by the window, watching their car pull away, a quiet certainty settled inside me. They weren't done. They couldn't be. Because once people decide a future for you, they don't stop until you're standing exactly where they want you. But the next step wouldn't be theirs. It would be mine. And it would begin not in a clinic, not in an office, but in a law firm with someone who knew exactly how to make their plan unravel. Some days begin quietly, but carry a current beneath them, the kind that pulls you toward a decision you didn't know you were ready to make. The morning after the serious talk, I woke up with one clear thought. I wasn't the one who needed an evaluation. If you're watching this, tell me your first name or what time it is where you are. The sky was pale when I left the house. The air crisp, the kind that makes your breath visible. I drove without rushing, without music, without distraction. My hands were steady on the wheel. My mind was sharp. When people push you quietly, relentlessly, strategically, clarity becomes a survival instinct. The law firm building stood at the corner of a wide intersection. Glass windows catching the early sunlight. Carter and Westman, legal. The same firm that had accidentally revealed my son's involvement. I walked through the revolving door, feeling the calm weight of every document in my folder tucked beneath my arm. The receptionist looked up with a warm, professional smile. Good morning. Do you have an appointment? Yes, I said. With Attorney Carter? Her smile stiffened slightly. Name? Michael Harris. She typed quickly, eyes flicking to the screen. Something changed in her expression. Recognition, perhaps, or realization. One moment, she said, he'll be right with you. A minute later, a tall man in a charcoal suit stepped into the lobby. His handshake was firm but respectful. Mr. Harris, he said. Let's talk. His office was quiet, filled with soft light and neatly organized shelves. He offered coffee, which I declined. Then he sat across from me with the posture of someone who knew this wasn't going to be a casual conversation. How can I help you today? He asked. I placed my folder on the table between us. I think you're already involved, I said gently. He blinked. Involved. I opened the folder slowly, not dramatically, just precisely, and slid out the documents one by one. The insurance letter. The anonymous note, the address inquiry, the appointment. Logs, the fabricated evaluation. The draft deed transfer. The snapshot of Daniel's unsent message. The record of unauthorized medical. Access, a map of intentions. A timeline of pressure. A paper trail Daniel and Emily believed I wasn't following. Carter's eyes narrowed as he scanned the pages. The silence in the room changed. It thickened, sharpened, shifted from curiosity to concern. Double quotes, Mr. Harris, he said carefully. Were you aware your son initiated paperwork for potential transfer of your property? Yes, I said. But I wasn't aware he involved your firm without my consent. He exhaled softly. Not out of guilt. Out of recognition. Recognition of what he was seeing written clearly on paper. I want one document, I said quietly. Preservation notice. Full asset freeze. Immediate effect. His brows rose slightly. You want to protect your property? I want to protect my choices. He nodded slowly. I can file that today. He turned to his computer, typing quickly. As he drafted the notice, he asked questions. Calm, precise questions. When did the pressure begin? What exactly was said? Who initiated contact with your doctor? Do you feel unsafe? I said not unsafe. Just observed. He understood what I meant. When the document was ready, he printed it. The page slid from the printer with a clean mechanical sound, the sound of something being put into place that should have been there all along. I read every line, effective immediately. All actions regarding the transfer, modification, or reassignment of property belonging to Michael Harris are prohibited without direct written consent. All attempts will be logged and legally contested. He handed me a pen. My signature landed on the page with absolute steadiness. This will stop them, he said. No, I replied. It will expose them. He gave a slow nod, a professional's nod, the kind that respects strategy quietly. Before I left, he added one more thing. I'll send you a digital copy and file notice. If anyone tries anything after this, you'll know immediately. When I stepped back outside, the sun had risen fully. The light was clearer now, sharper across the pavement. I walked to my car, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks, control. As I was driving home, my phone buzzed 3 times in a row. 3 missed calls, all from Emily. No. Voicemail, no message. Not yet. People don't panic when they're winning. They panic when something shifts out of their control. I knew the moment they saw the preservation notice. They would realize the ground beneath them had changed. When I got home, the digital confirmation was already in my inbox. Filed, stamped. Active. I printed it and slid it into my folder. Item number 15, preservation notice filed. Legal protection activated. Counter move successful. As I closed the folder, the phone finally buzzed again. A message from Emily. Call us now. I didn't. Because I knew that whatever came next, their panic would reveal the truth faster than confrontation ever could. And in the next chapter, their voices would finally give them away, not through words, but through tone.
Ow.
Some truths aren't revealed by what people say, but by how quickly they say it. That's what struck me the moment my phone began buzzing. 3 calls in a row, all from Emily, all unanswered. If you're watching this, tell me your first name or where you're listening from. I had barely finished filing the preservation notice, and the first call burned across my screen. Then the second, then the third. No voicemail, no explanation. Just insistence, a kind that only appears. When someone feels the ground shifting beneath them, I set the phone on the table and let it ring in silence. The house was calm. The afternoon. Sun stretched across the floor in slow-moving rectangles. Everything around me was still patient, sharp contrast to the panic coming through the small device vibrating against the wood. After a minute, the call stopped. Then came the message, call us, we need to talk. No heart emoji this time. No soft language, no hope you're well, just urgency. I waited another beat before calling back. Not because I wanted to be dramatic, but because silence had become my strategy. Silence unsettles people who rely on control. Emily answered before the first ring completed. Michael, are you okay? Her voice was too bright, too high. Too fast. Yes, I said calmly. Why? I could hear Daniel in the background, not speaking, whispering, a faint rustle of clothing, sound of someone pacing, sound of someone who had just discovered a door they thought was open, had been locked in front of them. Emily cleared her throat. We saw something unusual. Something about a notice. She said, notice the way someone says explosive, carefully, hoping it won't detonate. A preservation notice, I replied evenly. Filed this morning. Silence. but not the comfortable kind. The kind where two people realize their plan has hit a legal wall. Daniel's voice rose from behind her, too sharp to be hidden. He actually did it? I didn't comment. I let the question hang unanswered. Emily rushed in, layering her voice with sugar. Michael, sweetheart, why would you file something so drastic? We were just trying to help. You didn't need to, I did. I interrupted gently. Another pause, this one longer. I could hear the shift in her breathing. Daniel whispering again. Ask him what he told the lawyer. Ask now. Their panic was no longer concealed. It was spilling through the speaker. Emily tried again, this time slower. Can you walk us through what you filed? We're confused? No, I said. You're not confused. You're surprised. The silence that followed wasn't accidental. It was heavy, thick, full of the things they didn't want to say out loud. Daniel took the phone from her then. His voice was tight, forced into politeness like a suit he didn't want to wear. Dad, he said. We were blindsided. You should have talked to us first. Didn't talk to me first, replied softly. That broke something in the call. Not loudly, but cleanly. Emily's voice cut back in. Michael, that's not fair. We've been trying to guide you through these decisions. You've been overwhelmed, and I haven't been overwhelmed, said. The truth, delivered calmly, hit them harder than anger ever could. There was a shuffle, a muffled exchange. The sound of two people arguing about strategy while believing you can't hear them. He's not supposed to react like this. We moved too fast. I told you to wait. Then the line cleared. Daniel spoke again, strained. Dad, listen. Whatever you filed, it complicates things. Property decisions, medical plans, everything. We just want what's best for you. Can we please meet tomorrow? But underneath his words was something sharp, not concern. Fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of being exposed. Fear of the paper trail they didn't know they were creating. No, said gently. Tomorrow doesn't work. Another silence. Emily inhaled sharply. Michael, please, we're worried. You weren't worried, I replied. You were preparing. I could almost hear the ground shift beneath them. Okay, Daniel finally said, voice cracking at the edges. Then, tell us what you want. Tell us how to fix this. Fix this. The panic was no longer hidden. It was right there in the open, their voices trembling in a way they hadn't since the beginning. I'll let you know, I said softly. In time, and I ended the call, not out of cruelty, out of clarity. The room grew quiet again, soft, predictable. I stood at the window, watching the light fade across the street. A wind pushed a few leaves across the pavement, slow and almost melancholic. On the table, the preservation notice sat under the weight of the other documents, quiet reminder that the balance had shifted. They had pushed, they had planned, they had crossed lines. But now they were reacting, and reactions always reveal more than plans. I wrote in my notebook, item number 16, multiple urgent calls. Panic evident, attempted inquiry about legal actions. Tone shifted from authority to fear. I placed it in the folder and closed it gently, because the next step wouldn't be panic on a phone call. The next step would be an attempt, a digital one, a desperate one, a login they thought I wouldn't notice. But that the system recorded down to the minute? Some truths don't arrive with words, they arrive with timestamps. Cold, exact, irreversible. And when I saw the timestamp on that email, I understood just how far they were willing to go. If you're watching this, tell me your country or the time where you are. It happened early in the evening, just after the sun slipped behind the roofs across the street. I had been making tea in the kitchen, letting the kettle hum softly, when my phone buzzed with a notification from the county property system, a system I hadn't heard from in years. Alert. Change detected in property records. The subject. Line alone felt like a thin crack appearing in a glass window. I opened it. The details were clean. Clinical, unauthorized login attempt. Failed. Time. 6:41 p.m. device. Windows workstation location. Commercial IP. Address user. External relative access attempt. My heart didn't race. It simply settled. Because the next line removed all doubt. IP address matches. Ridgeway Financial Group. Daniel Harris workplace. I stood very still, the kettle clicking behind me as the water finished heating. Outside, the street was quiet, streetlights flickering on in soft amber glows. Everything looked normal, ordinary, safe, and yet someone had just tried to take my home. Not metaphorically, not emotionally. Legally, I sat down at the table, opened my laptop, and logged into the property system myself. The security log loaded slowly. As if the computer understood the weight of the moment, there it was again, the same entry, 6:41 p. Transfer form initiated. Field completed. Owner name. Field completed. Parcel ID blocked. Preservation notice. Detected. The system had stopped them. The document I filed that morning had saved me by nightfall. The attempted transfer didn't get far. The form froze, mid-process, but it got far enough to reveal intention, to reveal motive, to reveal desperation, and it got far enough to give me evidence. Clicked download log and saved it to my desktop. The file name. Auto-generated :255-transfer-attempt_redacted.pdf. I printed it immediately. The warm sheet slid into my hands like a verdict. This was the unexpected. Unambiguous, undeniable. I added it to my folder, labeling it item number 17, unauthorized deed transfer attempt, logged. Initiated from Daniel's workplace IP, blocked by preservation notice. The folder closed with a soft, deliberate click. A few minutes later, there was a knock at my door. Not a gentle knock, not a polite tap, a sharp, hurried knock, the kind you use when the thing you want has slipped out of your control. When I opened the door, Daniel stood there, breath uneven, eyes wide, jacket unzipped, as if he'd come straight from his car without stopping. "Dad," he said. Stepping forward too quickly, "We need to talk. Right now." I didn't move aside. "About what?" His jaw tightened. "Don't do that." You know what? His hair was slightly out of place, rare for him. His tie angled, not straight. His shirt wrinkled at the collar. He looked rattled. "What happened tonight?" I asked. He blinked. "What do you mean?" "You tell me," I said softly. He swallowed. Hard. Did you lock the property system?" "Yes." His eyebrows twitched, the smallest movement, but revealing. "Why would you do that?" "Why would someone try to access it?" I answered, his lips parted, but no words came. His silence was loud, painfully loud, the kind that contains all the confessions someone refuses to say. "Dad." "Listen," he finally whispered. "There's a misunderstanding. Someone at work might have no one at your workplace knows my parcel ID," I said calmly. He froze again. Behind him, a car door opened softly. Emily stepped out, walking toward the porch with a measured, almost cinematic calm. Her expression wasn't panicked. It was calculated. "Michael," she said. "We need to have a mature conversation. These choices you're making, they're harming all of us." All of us, the phrasing struck me like a quiet bell. Not you, not the family. All of us, she and Daniel. United in motive. "Someone tried to take my home tonight," I said softly, "and the system recorded everything." Emily didn't flinch. She looked at Daniel, a split-second glance filled with blame, urgency, and fear. Then she turned back to me, voice calm but trembling at the edges. We were trying to protect what's best for everyone. There it was, the confession without the word confession. I stepped back slightly, letting the cold air fill the doorway. The porch light cast a long shadow behind them, stretching their silhouettes thin and unsteady. I said, "We're done for tonight." Emily opened her mouth to argue, but Daniel touched her arm lightly. "Let's go," he muttered. They left without another word. Their footsteps fading down the driveway, two people walking away from a plan they thought was invisible. Inside, the house felt warmer than before. Safer, not because the danger was gone, but because I finally held the truth on paper. Their desperation had shown its face, and the next step would be Daniel's. Not through documents or emails, but through the first real crack in his voice. A quiet confession he didn't know he was about to make. Some confessions arrive dressed as silence. They don't come with apologies or tears. They come with the sound a person makes when their plans no longer work the way they rehearsed. That's what I heard when Daniel showed up at my door the next morning, unannounced, unsteady, and without Emily. If you're watching this, tell me your time zone or what you're doing right now. He didn't knock this time. He rang the bell once, then again, faster. I opened the door to find him standing there with his hands in his jacket pockets, shoulders pulled tight, like someone holding in words that were threatening to spill. "Dad," he said quietly, "can we talk? Just us? Just us." That phrase hadn't existed between us in weeks. Everything had been we, him, and Emily. Their strategy, their timing, their plan, so hearing "just us" told me something important. The pressure was working, not on me. On them, I stepped aside, letting him in. The morning light came through the blinds in thin, straight lines, splitting the living room into stripes of gold and shadow. Daniel sat on the couch, the same spot he used to sit when he was a teenager, avoiding telling me he failed a math test. But this time, the stakes were different. He ran a hand through his hair. "I know last night looked bad." "It didn't look bad," I said softly. "It was bad," he flinched. But he didn't deny it. Not immediately. There was a long pause, the kind that makes people decide whether to lie or to unravel. "I need to explain," he said finally. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like the truth was written there. "Dad, things have been hard." His voice cracked on the last word. Hard. The universal justification. I didn't speak. Silence was my leverage, my safest and sharpest tool. He took a shaky breath. "Money's been tight. Really tight. Emily's business took a hit. We have debts." Real ones? There it was. Not a confession, but the shadow of one. He kept going. "We thought, if we could stabilize things, even temporarily, it would help everyone." "By stabilizing things," I said quietly, "you mean taking my home?" He didn't look up. His fingers tightened into fists. "We weren't taking it. We were trying to shift things around. Just until," he stopped himself, "until things got better. Until the pressure eased. Until the bills stopped stacking up. Until the crisis. Past their crisis. Not mine. Why didn't you tell me you were struggling?" I asked. His jaw clenched. "Because you've always been careful, logical." "You would have said no." "I would have said no to manipulation," I corrected. "Not to helping." He swallowed a painful, visible swallow, as if those words had been sharper than he expected. For a moment, something vulnerable flashed across his face. Something almost childlike. But vulnerability isn't an apology. It's a feeling, not a choice. He finally lifted his eyes to mine. Emily said, "We needed a plan. Something secure. Something guaranteed. She said you wouldn't miss the house, that you'd be happier somewhere smaller. And you agreed?" I asked. His lips parted. He tried to answer, no sound came out. That silence was the confession. Because silence from an honest man is hesitation. Silence from a guilty one is admission. I let the moment breathe. Then I stood and walked to my desk. I opened my folder slow, deliberate, and pulled out the printed activity log from the property system. I placed it on the coffee table in front of him. "Do you recognize this?" I asked. He stared at it. The color drained from his face. "This is your workplace IP," I continued. "The login attempt came from your office. You weren't helping me, Daniel. You were trying to remove me." He pressed his palms into his eyes. "Dad," his voice broke. Not with remorse. With being caught. He lowered his hands slowly, staring at the page, his own digital fingerprint staring back at him. "We needed the money," he whispered. The sentence hung in the air, thin, fragile. Ugly. Not "we made a mistake." Not "we went too far." Not "we're sorry." We needed the money for words that made everything clear. I sat down again, across from him. I understand that you're hurting, but you crossed a line. A line you knew existed. He didn't argue. He didn't defend Emily. He didn't defend himself. He just sat there, the weight of his choices flattening the confidence he'd been hiding behind. After a long silence, he said the one honest thing he'd said in weeks. I didn't think you'd fight back. I nodded. That's the problem. The conversation ended not with shouting, but with an exhale, long, tired, resigned. He stood, shoulders slumped, and walked to the door. At the threshold, he hesitated. Dad, are you going to tell anyone? I already did, I said softly. My lawyer. He closed his eyes. A quiet acceptance washed over him. Then he left. When the door clicked shut, the house didn't feel lighter, but it felt clearer, cleaner, as if the truth had finally stepped into the room and taken a seat. I placed the activity log back in my folder, adding my note. Item number 18, Daniel's partial admission. Motive, financial instability. Confirmation through silence. Because the next part of their plan wouldn't be spoken. It would arrive on paper clean, official, devastating. A file that would change everything. Some truths don't knock. They arrive in envelopes, clean, silent, official. The kind of paper that doesn't raise its voice, because it doesn't need to, or what time it is right now. It arrived the next morning, not in the mailbox. Not slipped under the door, delivered by hand, placed gently on my porch in a thick white envelope stamped with a blue insignia. I recognized from the county office. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I stood there for a moment, letting the cold morning air settle around me. The street looked peaceful, washed in soft winter light. A jogger passed, waving politely. A dog barked 2 houses down. Everything looked ordinary, but in my hands was something that wasn't ordinary at all. I brought the envelope inside, set it on the kitchen table, and boiled water for tea. Ritual calms the mind. Routine keeps panic from slipping through the cracks. When the kettle clicked off, I poured the water, sat down, slid a finger under the envelope flap. Inside was a thin stack of documents. The first page stared up at me. Petition for temporary protective oversight filed on behalf of Daniel Harris and Emily Harris. Filed on behalf of Daniel Harris and Emily Harris. My hands remained steady. But the world around me shifted not violently. Just enough for the floor to feel farther away than it was. I read the next line slowly. Claim, diminished capacity. Request. Provisional authority over property decisions pending evaluation. A guardianship petition. A legal attempt to take control of my autonomy cleanly. Quietly, permanently. But the next line was what stopped my breath entirely. Supporting evidence submitted electronically. Evidence, not facts, not truth. Evidence, meaning the lies they'd planted in my medical file. The fabricated evaluation. Notes, the concern emails, the rehearsed. Phrases about confusion. Pieces they had seeded over weeks, maybe months. Now assembled into a single narrative. Narrative meant to remove me from the decisions of my own life. I kept reading. Attached was a digitally generated timeline dates. Notes, observations. Some of it subtle, some of it bold enough to be insulting, but all of it pointed toward one purpose, to paint me as incapable, to justify a takeover, to make option 2 look compassionate. The page at the bottom listed the date the petition was filed. Filed yesterday. For 17 p.m. the same evening, Daniel showed up at my door looking panicked. The same evening. They pretended nothing formal had been started, but it had been. Long before the attempted transfer. Long before the panic calls. Long before Daniel's shaky half-dash confession. I placed the papers face down on the table and leaned back in my chair, letting the silence expand. My breath fogged slightly in the cool air. Outside, a car drove by slowly, tires crunching over scattered gravel. When my mind settled, I lifted the phone and called Carter. He answered on the first ring. Mr. Harris. I received a petition, I said. A rustle of paper, a sharp inhale. Already. That was fast. They filed it before we spoke, I said. Before they knew I had legal protection. He exhaled slowly, a measured breath. The kind lawyers release when something aligns too neatly with their worst expectations. Bring it in, he said. Today, I hung up, gathered the papers, and slipped them into my evidence folder, the one that had grown thicker than any deception they'd attempted. Before leaving the house, I added a new note. Item number 19, petition for temporary protective oversight. Filed by Daniel and Emily, based on fabricated evidence. Filed before confrontation. The folder snapped shut like a lock clicking into place. When I arrived at the law office, Carter was already waiting. He spread the documents across his desk, scanning them with the speed of someone trained to look for weaknesses. His forehead tightened as he read. This, he said, tapping the petition, is serious. But it's also sloppy, pointed to the dates. Their timeline contradicts itself, pointed to the medical notes. Entries don't follow clinical language guidelines, he pointed to the claims. Half of this is hearsay. The other half is fabricated, and he looked at me. They overplayed their hand. Strange quiet settled inside me. Not victory, not relief, just clarity. What happens now? I asked. We respond, he said, and not gently. We'll file for a full audit of all digital submissions. Your doctor will testify, and the preservation notice blocks their primary motive. He sat back, eyes steady. When the county sees this, their petition will crumble, the first time in weeks. I felt something loosen in my chest, not safety, but direction. After the meeting, I drove home slowly, windows half open, letting the cold air wash over me. The sky was turning orange, the day fading into soft light at my doorstep. One more thing waited for me, not a document, not a note, not a knock. A text from Daniel. We didn't mean for it to go this far. But they had. They absolutely had. And in the next chapter, they would learn what happens when a plan built on pressure meets a response built on truth. Because tomorrow, I wouldn't be the one cornered. They would be. You said,